Please welcome our last speaker, Holly V, with 7 years from Everett, Washington.
I'm Holly. I'm a heroin addict.
So, Holly.
Yeah, this is kind of crazy. My clean date is 12/2/15. It was the last day I used heroin. I grew up in a home of addicts. My mom was a crack addict. My dad was a crack addict. And so at the age of 3, I was removed from the home due to addiction. So I grew up in foster homes. I was moved from home to home because of bad behavior that I had. I struggled very emotionally. I was harmful to others at the age of 5. I was harmful to myself. 9 years, whatever, later, when I was 8, I was replaced back with my dad, who was still in his addiction. He was a very huge drunk. And so then again, like, I had to witness addiction, right? Very abusive environment. He had gotten remarried and had 2 more children. And my stepmom as well, like, was a very heavy drinker. And so, there was like nights where I would go without eating, or where I couldn't go out of my room. And so I fell into like a huge depression. I wouldn't get out of bed. I wouldn't go to school. And so my dad, at the age of 13, was like, look, you're going to live with your mom, right? Who I had barely anything to do with. And so I go out to Massachusetts to live with my mom. And the first day there, we get into a physical altercation. She was heavy into her addiction, pills, crack, alcohol. And so there, like, my addiction began, I felt alone. And so I was digging into her pills, and I was taking her marijuana and her alcohol, and I spiraled. I got so depressed. By that time, I ended up trying to commit suicide, and I drank a whole bottle of Drano in the bathroom. And my mom was, saying I was drunk, and her boyfriend knew exactly what was going on. There was an empty bottle of Drano, and I'm throwing up, and so he had ended up rushing me to the hospital, and if I didn't get there, I would have died in 30 minutes. The Drano was burning a hole through my stomach. And so at that time, my mom didn't have custody of me, right? And so I became a ward of the state of Massachusetts. And so my dad had to fly out to Massachusetts and go to a bunch of court dates and try to get custody of me. And then again, like, I was sent from Massachusetts back to Washington, still dealing with my depression, not wanting to live. And so again, like, I was just kind of trying to survive, dealing with the abuse of, the alcohol in my home, and my stepmom. And then, I had found heroin. Right? I was walking down the street, and these 2 girls about my age were like, hey, you want to hang out? And at the time, like, I had really no idea. I didn't know that fucking heroin was so addicting, but I knew that drugs was the best way to cope with my feelings. And in that moment, I took that first hit, and I was like, something inside me told me to stop, or I was going to die. But I still felt like I really wanted more. Like, I wanted it, right? My whole being, like, I didn't stop. Like, I was on the run. I went missing from home. My dad had placed a missing persons report, and he hadn't seen me in a year. I had caught some charges in the meantime, a couple felonies and some misdemeanors. And they caught up to me, right? I ended up getting arrested. They told me I could go to treatment, and if I went to treatment, that my charges would, I had to go to treatment, I had to go to a recovery home, and if I finished that, like, I would be off probation. I wouldn't have any, I wouldn't have to do any more time. I ended up going to treatment, and I ended up going to a recovery home out in Mount Vernon called John King. I stayed there 8 days, and they gave me a $10 bill for a allowance. I ended up jumping out the window and hitchhiking to Marysville to get more dough, right? And then again, like, my addiction was full blown. I was on the streets. I was homeless, sleeping underneath street lamps, sleeping in trap houses that had no heat, no power, no sewer, nothing. you know, doing whatever I fucking could to get heroin, right? Going against all my morals and boundaries to get heroin. My uncle had eventually gotten a hold of me and was like, hey, we need to turn yourself in. Like, you can't keep freaking running. And so I was like, okay, right? I ended up turning myself in. They offered me drug court. And I mean, I didn't make it, right? Every other weekend I was in jail for using drugs. I was hanging out with felons. I was still doing the same old shit, right? And I ended up opting out, right? I did a little bit of time at the end, but then I was free, right? Like, I didn't have any probation, I had nothing. I thought I was good to go. And my addiction, again, took over, right? And this time worse, right? This time I thought I had it. I was like, okay, right? Like, I'm good. I'm just not gonna do anything that's gonna get me in jail. And I ended up getting caught by the police, and he was like, hey, like, I see that you just got out of drug court. Like, what do you want to do, right? And in that moment, I was like, okay, right? At this point, like, my dad had gotten clean, right? Like, he was sober. He was going to AA meetings. And he was doing really good. And so I was like, okay, right? Like, let's do this. And so I ended up going to an AA meeting in Snohomish. And I tried really hard. Like, I really wanted it, right? And I still couldn't get it. I would get 30 days. I would go back out. I would get 30 days and I would go back out. I just couldn't fucking get it. And I remember walking down the street in Snohomish and I was like, I am going to go to prison. I'm going to get pregnant and I'm going to die. Like, that was the story I was telling myself, right? And I ended up getting pregnant at the age of 19, and like, that's what God knew. God knew that I needed that because it saved my fucking life. In that moment, I thought about me, that little girl that was getting drugged through addiction by her parents, and I was like, I am not dragging this baby through addiction. I ended up getting clean, and I stayed clean throughout my whole pregnancy. I had a beautiful baby girl. She didn't have to withdraw when she was in the hospital. And I was raising her. I was a single mom. Her dad was in her addiction, or in his addiction. And when she was 10 months old, her dad called me and was like, look, I'm clean. I want to see my daughter. I was like, okay. And that day, the day that I let him come back into my life, that night I was loaded. I was like, okay. I had 18 months clean. I was like, I can't do this. I'm going to pretend like it didn't happen. I'm going to lie to everybody. I'm going to go to my meetings. I'm going to lie. The next day I was loaded again. And then I was like, okay, it's a fluke thing, right? Like, fluke, like, it didn't happen. I'm going to keep lying. And the next day I was loaded again. And I knew that if I didn't tell somebody, I was going to continue to get loaded. And so I told my dad, I was like, look, I've been loaded for the last 3 days. I need to get clean again. And he said, I'm taking your daughter. And I was like, no, you're not. I'm going to get clean. And that's my clean date, 12/2/15. I haven't used heroin in 7 years. And
Hell yeah.
when I came to the rooms of Heroin Anonymous, like, I feel like I found home, right? I've worked the 12 steps. I have a sponsor, and I show up, and when service is asked of me, I do it, right? And like, the whole thing, like, God got me this far, right? Like, the story I was telling for myself for years was like, I'm gonna get pregnant, I'm gonna go to prison, and I'm gonna die, right? And like, thank God, you know what I mean? Thank God. Because like, today, like, my daughter hasn't seen me loaded, right? I have 7 years, I haven't put heroin in my body, and like, I work the 12 steps, I have a sponsor, and I am actively hitting all sides of the coin, right? I live these spiritual principles today, I have morals and boundaries. I'm a lady of integrity and dignity, and empathy and compassion. And like, that little girl inside of me, like, is loved today, right? Like, that little girl that was getting moved from foster home to foster home, wondering what her parents are doing. Like, she doesn't have to wonder anymore, right? Like I have built relationships with my parents again. My dad has 10 years sober, you know, and like, he gets to help me with my daughter as well. And like, I've made amends to my family, you know, and like, Like that's what this program's about, right? Like getting our families back and being of service, you know, and like without a higher power, like I wouldn't have been able to do that. Like I would still be on the streets, in the cold, sleeping underneath street lamps, smoking and poking, right? Doing whatever the fuck I could to get heroin. You know, like that's, if I don't continue to work this program, like I will so easily be back there. And so like today, like I'm very vigilant. I'm vigilant. I don't know. My life today, like I'm beyond blessed, right? And it's not about like the peace that I have inside myself. Like I wouldn't trade it for anything. And it's all because like I have God in my heart. And that's all due to the 12 steps, right? Because like I admitted I was fucking powerless that one day, right? I was like, fuck, if I continue to fucking use, like I'm gonna drag this baby through addiction and I'm gonna drag myself again through fucking addiction, you know? And then I fucking came to believe in a higher power that restored me to fucking sanity, you know? And then I turned my life over to him. And like today, like I walk with God every single day, right? And like I continue to work all the steps and continuously, right? And like today, like I get to be that woman that comforted me when I first walked into the rooms, right? Like I get to be the woman with integrity and dignity in Heroin Anonymous for the newcomer. And that is what this program's about. Because if I don't give what I have, like I'm not gonna keep it, right? Like I'm gonna lose everything. It's been proven to me, if I live, you know, I'm gonna be right back there, you know, like my thinking's fucked up, you know what I mean? Like I wanna feel good, you know? I wanna feel fucking whole. I wanna find something that will mask my fucking feelings. That is my fucking ultimatum, right? But like with God, like I get to help the still suffering addict. So, I don't know, I think that's it. Thanks.
There you are.
Thank you so much, Holly, for sharing your experience, strength, and hope with us. Please help me give a special thanks tonight to tonight's speakers, Jenny, Roy, Holly, for sharing their experience, strength, and hope. And one more second.
Really quick announcement. If you haven't did a $10 suggestion at the door, please do what you can. The funds go to literature, supporting the hall, and supporting our growing fellowship. Thanks. That's all.
Hey, I got an announcement too. Go to Lano Club in back room at 8. All right.
I'm Sam. I'm an addict. I don't know if we pass the basket around for the cleanse. Proactive over here.
It's a Zoom recorder.